Christopher Nolan is one of the best directors of the 21st century, with a quite incredible filmography. Oppenheimer, The Dark Knight, Inception, Dunkirk, and that weird, timey-wimey film, Tenet. The 8-time Oscar nominee director, known for his distinctive, often non-linear, style of storytelling. In our recent poll, I asked the question, who is the best director out of Edgar Wright, Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, and James Gunn? And Nolan received 79% of the vote. So it's clear that he's one of the best current directors. But what is his most successful movie? And how does his most recent film, Oppenheimer, stack up against his Batman trilogy? In this video, we will look at the highest grossing film of Nolan's career. We will look at the inflation-adjusted budget of the movie, double it to account for marketing and a cut of the ticket the cinema gets, and then deduct that from the movie's worldwide box office. So without any further ado, let's kick off with Christopher Nolan's 5th most successful movie.
We're not meant to save the world. We're meant to leave it.
So in 5th place we have Interstellar. After Nolan's Batman trilogy concluded with The Dark Knight Rises in 2012, his next movie was Interstellar, with Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, and Jessica Chastain, as well as an 18-year-old Timothée Chalamet. Interstellar may be Nolan's biggest film in terms of scope, and perhaps more than a Prestige or Inception, Interstellar showed the intellectual capacity of Nolan, as the movie deals with the concept of time, wormholes, quantum mechanics, and space exploration. An interesting behind-the-scenes anecdote is that for Cooper's farm on planet Earth, Nolan planted 300 acres of corn, instead of CGIing the cornfield in during post-production. He ended up selling the corn after filming wrapped and made a profit. Talking of profit, with a budget of $165 million, Interstellar made $647 million at the box office in 2014, which when adjusted for inflation comes to $842 million. Double this for marketing and distribution costs, and Interstellar had a profit of $414 million. Number 4. Inception.
It's called Inception.
The dream within a dream movie with the famous spinning top open ending, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy, and the actor with the last name Page. The master thief Cobb is given a task of planting an idea inside a wealthy businessman's subconscious mind. The tension, intrigue, and twists and turns of Inception truly established Nolan as a household name. Inception recognised Nolan as a director with a rare mix of original ideas combined with major studio backing, which financed grand spectacle to Nolan's thought-provoking concepts. With a production budget of $160 million, Inception made $825 million. When adjusted for inflation and taken into account marketing and distribution, Inception made a profit of $714 million. Number 3. Oppenheimer.
Why? How about because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world?
The film which finally delivered Nolan his Oscar. In fact, it delivered him 2, Best Director and Best Picture. The R-rated biopic covering the life of Julius Robert Oppenheimer, played by Cillian Murphy. Oppenheimer is the second highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, as well as being the darker half of the cultural phenomenon Barbenheimer. Oppenheimer had a very small budget thanks to its biopic premise. Just people talking in a room would be a crude summation of 90% of the movie. The budget for Oppenheimer was $100 million, and it brought in $960 million at the box office, $971 million when adjusted for inflation. Deducting the inflation-adjusted production and marketing budgets from the box office, and Oppenheimer made a profit of $769 million. Number 2. The Dark Knight Rises.
You think this can last? There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne.
When a sequel follows on from a fantastic movie, the enthusiasm of what came before can really increase the hype and subsequent box office of the sequel, aka Captain Marvel after Avengers Infinity War, the Star Wars sequels, or in this case, The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. Rises certainly benefited from the strong critical and audience response to The Dark Knight. And yes, it's not perfect, but it is definitely a really good film. The scope is larger than The Dark Knight, and the acting is top tier. Tom Hardy gives a memorable performance as Bane, with Christian Bale, Anne Hathaway, Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman and Gary Oldman also giving great performances. The Dark Knight Rises concluded Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy in a very satisfying way, and I guess we're all still waiting for that spin-off Robin movie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Looking at the finances, The Dark Knight Rises had a budget of $230 million, which is a very high budget for 2012, and it made $1,082 million at the box office. When adjusted for inflation, the total budget comes to $616 million, and the box office is slightly under $1.5 billion, meaning that The Dark Knight Rises made a profit of $837 million. So finally, on to number 1. Of course, it's The Dark Knight.
We're tonight's entertainment. Well, hello, beautiful.
Starring, what's his name again? Oh yeah, Heath Ledger, with one of the most talked about performances of all time as the Joker. The Dark Knight builds on a setup from Batman Begins and shows Gotham City and the Caped Crusader in a darker, grittier light. It's easy to focus exclusively on Ledger's performance, not only because of how brilliant he is in the film, but also because of the real-world tragedy of Ledger's passing, which adds all the more weight to his performance as Joker. There are so many aspects to The Dark Knight that are equally impressive. Bale plays Bruce Wayne perfectly, the spectacle of the Batwing, Batmobile and Batbike, the inner workings of Gotham's crime families, and the uneasy connection with the police and the justice system, as well as the deconstruction of society and fallibility of good men as demonstrated by the fall of Harvey Dent. The Dark Knight had a production budget of $185 million and made just under $1 billion, and by just under, I mean just under. It made $999 million at the box office. When adjusted for inflation, The Dark Knight made a profit of $901 million. To cover all of Christopher Nolan's major releases, here's their budgets, box office numbers, and their profits. Tenet is the obvious outlier as it made a loss, certainly in part due to the ambitious/incomprehensible plot of the movie, and the fact that it also came out after many countries only just loosened COVID restrictions, which definitely affected Tenet's box office. Nolan's Batman trilogy grossed $2.5 billion, $3.5 billion when adjusted for inflation, with Batman Begins making just $356 million when it came out in 2005, compared to $999 million for The Dark Knight and $1.082 billion for Dark Knight Rises. 2017's Dunkirk comes in at 6th place, making a profit of $268 million. Christopher Nolan's career has spanned over 2 decades, and in this time, I would argue that we've seen 3 different eras of Nolan. His original films in the early 2000s, such as Memento, Insomnia and The Prestige, then his Batman trilogy mixed in with bigger scale original movies such as Inception and Interstellar. Then we have, box office speaking, the worst period of Nolan's career, with Dunkirk and Tenet. And now we're on to the 4th stage, after the storming success of Oppenheimer. Perhaps now we'll see Nolan move to more biographical films, or as it's been more than a decade since The Dark Knight Rises, maybe we'll see Nolan helm another major IP, such as James Bond. If you enjoyed this video, then consider checking out the Ranked by Box Office playlist. That should be on your screen now and is in the description below. If you're new here, then perhaps consider subscribing to Film Club. I review the major films and shows on their release, as well as the occasional video essay like this one. Next up, on a box office ranking playlist, I'll be covering all of Denis Villeneuve's films, such as Dune, Blade Runner 2049 and Sicario. The next video on the channel will be deciding which franchise is best, Shrek or Kung Fu Panda. Thank you for watching, and see you again.